We're going live right now. So go ahead and tell me, Jacob, about that DFS lineup that melted faces last week.
Yeah, well, it melted my own face when I got the text in our full tilt Slack when Maddie's like, "Hey, Miles Sanders hand injury," but it was dope. Took down second place in the 7,800 person triple option contest last week, and of course we played Joe Burrow, double stacked with T Higgins and Jamar Chase. Brought it back with Mark Andrews. All those pieces were roughly in like the 7 to 12% own range. And I mean, last week was just kind of figuring out what are we going to do about these mega chalk pieces, because we had Justin Jackson, James Robinson at running back, a little bit less so Ronald Jones. And then we had Cooper Kupp and Antonio Brown, a wide receiver, plus Josh Palmer as the cheap guy. And I decided Jackson was the only really chalky running back I was going to play. I played almost no Madison. I played almost no Rojo. And I played like, I think 0 James Robinson, which I mean, obviously I just got lucky. But I really like these other running backs that were super under-owned. So I played Jackson, but I also played Sony Michel in that lineup. And then I played frickin' Miles Sanders in that lineup. But I also was playing a lot of Damian Harris this week, which was great. I was also playing a lot of Joe Mixon this week, which was great. I was also playing a lot of Cordell Patterson, which of course was not great. No. But I just felt like we had all these guys like Mixon, Patterson, Damian Harris, Sony Michel, Miles Sanders, all in really good spots where I think, had we not had these obvious mispriced backups in Ronald Jones and in Justin Jackson, I'm like, these would be guys that would be chalk on a worse slate. So let's just play these guys. And, why can't they outscore? And specifically Sony, he was my number one guy this week because I looked at him. He's $5,500 on DraftKings. He had been the workhorse back with Henderson out. Then Henderson came back, and we talked about this in the Showdown preview where Sony Michel was half the ownership, and he played basically a workhorse role. He's over 75% of the snaps. And we know that LA wants to run a one-back backfield. Now, they switch who that back is fairly often. But what they don't usually do is just come out and play a 50-50 committee. So, I mean, I just felt like, the risk factor is to the floor, right? Like the risk factor is, okay, what if Henderson comes out, he's the lead back again? That doesn't really concern me from a DFS perspective. I'm just looking at the ceiling. The ceiling is we have a $5,500 workhorse back in the game with the highest total on the slate, and at 2% ownership. So I played a lot of Sony. And then I played AB in this lineup, which was nice. And then the tight end was, of course, Andrews. Yeah. But the Sony play was honestly like the bulk of most of my lineups because not only was he under-owned, but Stafford was the most owned quarterback on the slate. And then Kupp was up at 40% ownership. So to me, I was like, Sony allows me to sort of get leverage off of like Rojo and James Robinson in the same price range. But also I get to leverage the Rams passing attack if Sony gets a touchdown or if the game script comes up. And he also kind of leverages Madison, right? Because then it's that opposite game script.
I had one of the best wide receiver lineups across the whole entire slate. I had a ton of Higgins. I had a ton of Brown, Antonio Brown, and I have a ton of somebody else. I can't remember who it is off the top of my head. But the second that James Robinson went out on like the first drive, it immediately killed. Yeah, because I had James Robinson about 40% of my lineups too.
Oh my gosh!
So and it was weird. I went back and looked at it, and I did such a bad job at making sure that I had differentiating lineups. So like I had pretty much almost every single lineup that I had both Antonio Brown and Higgins, and I also had James Robinson because the price worked out. The price was like the perfect, mix. And I didn't see anybody. I didn't go with you like how you went with Sonny Michel. I just didn't see anybody that range that I would rather go for other than James Robinson because I just thought James Robinson would see the volume, which he probably would have. But I mean,
he would have had a great day. Yeah.
Neither here nor there. It didn't happen.
But I think the factors, to be honest, I actually didn't play that much Burrow. I played 2 Burrow lineups out of 22. And I got really lucky that the one Burrow lineup that I happened to have just like also had all my other good plays in it, right? With like AB and Michelle, and that I did the right stack with Andrews as the bring back, and that I played Jackson in that lineup, etc. And I had Eagles defense in that lineup, which is kind of a blessing and a curse because Eagles defense is why I played Sanders, because I correlated Sanders with Eagles D. So had I not played Eagles D in that lineup, I maybe would have played like Damian Harris in that lineup or something, who was a guy I played a lot of, but it worked out.
You remember how I told you, like I went back and I did, all these correlative studies with who won the Millie Maker. And although it's not accurate completely, because obviously you have other plays that were better than those possible plays, it was just something I did for fun. And, it's kind of funny how we think that the running back correlates with the defense, but in a lot of cases, that's not always the opportunity. I know that it does allow bad offenses to start passing more often, especially in the fourth quarter and whatnot. But the defenses that actually score the most amount of points are the ones who have opportunities to get touchdowns, which means that they're passing the entire game, on both sides. And there's more opportunities. There's more
passing attempts. You want the other team
attempts.
passing the entire game. You don't
I'm
need
saying
your
both
team to
teams.
pass the entire
I
game.
think both teams pass the entire game because it creates more opportunities because there are more plays run. So if you have one team that's running the entire time, you're running down the clock. Oh, that's great for cash games, right? That's great for normal fantasy. That's not great for DFS because you want as many opportunities as you can for a turnover. And if one team's running, the other team's passing a ton, it still kind of wears down on your opportunities to get more plays out of it. So
I think it's a little case by case. Like I am with you in respect. Like one of my favorite things to do is when there's like a shootout game that I'm not going to have the lineup in. Like actually, I'll talk about it if we're talking about defense on this show.
Perfect.
My favorite lineup, my favorite defense to play this week is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs defense. Yeah, because I like this situation a lot of time where there's a shootout game, especially if it's a game that I'm not going to play a lot of in my lineups. I'll play the defense in it because nobody wants to play the defense. A, because they're playing the opposing passing attack, right? No one wants to play their receivers, their quarterbacks into a defense or the running back into a defense. And B, because it's high scoring, people don't want to play that kind of game. And yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it can happen because you get a lot of passing situations, you get a lot of plays. And also it's nice for if you're kind of fading a game where if the defense gets a touchdown, like you're robbing the Chiefs of a touchdown, right? Like if I get a defensive touchdown, I'm robbing Patrick Mahomes, Darrell Williams,
and actually contrarian type play.
Touchdown. So I enjoy it. With this game specifically, I just looked at it. I was like, yeah, I mean, I just want Jake Fromm in a negative game script, right? Like I want that because it's going to be great. And I mean, we got it and it was freaking awesome, right?
All right. You ready to kick this show off?
Yeah, man, let's do this.
This is Fantasy Intervention. Now here to intervene with your fantasy life, Shane Manila, Jakob Sanderson, and Chase Vernon.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome on into Fantasy Intervention. I am super, super excited for this episode because guess what? We get to get back to DFS. And this is something that I did last year. I actually did 3 shows a week last year of DFS. We did our Monday show, we did our Thursday show, and of course we did our weekend show. And unfortunately this season, I've been a little bit too busy to do all that. I've not had time to put everything together. I've been doing stuff for Trophy Smack, for Player Profiler, for all sorts of stuff, for Dynasty Nerds, and I just have not had time to do our DFS shows. However, we decided with waiver wires being over with, right? It is time to break out the DFS episodes, the way to win you guys money. Like, we are here to make y'all money. So if you're somebody that's clicking on the show, y'all are coming to check it out, stay tuned for one episode. See if you like it. It's going to help you out for week 17 regardless, right? We're not going to field a lot of questions unless they're DFS related. We're not going to get into the matchups as much for your particular questions. However, we are going to dive into the matchups that we like, and you'll never know when you find a gem. When you find a gem that you actually love and that you can take home with you and you can acquire for these leagues. So stay tuned. This is our highest retention rate show. So obviously we were doing something right last year. Let's hope that we can bounce back to it. And of course, I have to bring in my co-host, Jakob Sanderson. What's going on, Jakob? How you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. I mean, we just came off what I thought was the most fun DFS weekend of the year strategically. It went really well. Folks were in the pre-show. Cashed a really nice lineup, took down second place in the triple option last week. And I'm excited to build off that this week. You know, it's going to be a fun one. I'm expecting more COVID news to come from after we finish the show. So we sort of have to end up talking a bit of a high level because I imagine it's going to be impossible to project what things will actually end up looking like once all that news comes through. But new policies announced today come out. And so maybe some of the guys on the COVID list that you were thinking you wouldn't have available, like a Mike Williams, a Cole Beasley, a Gabe Davis, Carson Wentz, you know, they might be back in lineups, Brandon Cook. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to break it all down and some big games this week. And especially what's going to be interesting to me too is I wonder all these folks that have been doing these best ball drafts all summer, right? And I was one of them. I did like 200 in these tournaments. Now, us absolute best ball degenerates, we've been plotting out this slate since May. We've been talking in Discords. We've been like, okay, what are the stacks you're going to do in your best ball drafts? Are you going to take KC Cincinnati? Are you going to take Rams Ravens? Are you going to take Cardinals Dallas? Like, we've been planning these for months. And I'm curious to see, are people going to play DFS lineups out of some of that dopamine, where these games that are about to be overrepresented in best ball, like a Rams and a Ravens, I'm curious to see if that carries over to DFS, where people are filling in these lineups, for things that they want to root for in their best ball tournaments.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of funny because best ball is so far and away like different to an extent from DFS, but also very similar in terms of like we don't know what's going to happen throughout the season. It's hard for us to predict, certain teams making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. And I mean, it's like drafting, which you just read an article recently on playerprofiler.com about drafting for the best ball for playoffs. And we don't even know who's making the playoffs yet. So it was very, interesting read. You guys need to go check that out over there at playerprofiler.com. What was the title of that article?
Solving the Gauntlet, which is their $25 tournament over there, but certainly applies to the mitten or the big mitten or, I don't know, the garbage mitt, whatever they're coming up with these days over at Underdog. And yeah, talk through some basic strategic ideas, especially of drafting early and how to really leverage, the uncertainty of where you're not drafting before the seeds, before who's in the playoffs. And then I'm actually working on another one as soon as I'm off the show. I'm going to write 5 galaxy brain strategies for playoff best ball drafts with roster constructions and trying to tease out some things that are a little bit out there. So I'm excited to go into playoff best ball after this best ball finals, and always excited to talk about DFS with you. So what are we diving into first, I mean?
Yeah, I mean, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Obviously, we're already 12 minutes in the show, haven't even gotten started on our episode yet. But I did want to bring up something real quick before we do get started. Our last little point of emphasis is Jacob and I have been talking about starting up a best ball show this entire season. Neither one of our schedules allowed for that to happen. Even if we wanted to, even if we both had opportune times and we could have recorded at separate times, it never would have happened because we did not have a chance to. But it's something that we've wanted to do because I'm somebody that focuses on matchups. I'm somebody that focuses a lot on the defense. I'm focusing a lot on, not the same sort of analytics that you look at, Jacob, where you're looking at opportunities for wide receivers. You're looking at, big plays. You're looking at, average depth of target amongst other things for the average, fan to realize, right? So it was kind of like, hey, if we can get together and we can talk about certain things, we can actually both agree on the same player. I feel like it has to be a slam dunk. It has to be something where it's like, oh, this guy is an automatic, must run out there and at least, 20, 30% of your lineups in DFS. So that's why I'm so excited for this episode, is because we're going to dive into these players. We're start out with some stacks at the quarterback position, and we're going to kind of go through these lineups and see what we agree on and what we don't. And if we end up agreeing on something, y'all better take out your notepads. I'm not saying you have to run it out right now because we still have COVID going on. I don't want y'all building your lineups just yet. But at least get out your DFS optimizer over there at playerprofiler.com, whatever DFS optimizer you end up using, and get your lineups ready to rock and roll, because you guys will find some valuable information from this show.
I agree, and I just wanted to say quick, like it's always fun talking stuff through, because I'm so like player agnostic in DFS. Like I can't even say what my lineups are gonna look like at this point, because ultimately it all comes down to ownership for me. But like if people ask me, for instance, like I had Sony Michel as my number 1 play last week, which was great. But people are like, oh, why'd you play Sony Michel? Part of it is because I just thought the projection was off. I thought that there was a higher than likelihood chance that he was going to be the workhorse, and I thought the projection was wrong. But biggest part of it is I'm looking at it as like, all right, we have the situation where Rojo is really popular, but the Bucks, like Brady actually isn't, even though Brown is and Rojo is, but Brady actually isn't that popular. On the other side, we have Kupp and Stafford are super, super popular, but Sony Michel is only like 2% owned, and nobody's playing Henderson, of course. So I'm like, hey, well, why would I play Rojo with the Rams passing at like quadruple the ownership of playing Sony with Brady, and I'll eat AB, and then I just got to pick whatever random wide receiver, right? And then so I ended up playing like a million Brady. I mean, of course, all those lineups sucked because Brady totally sucked. And it ended up being my Sony lineup with Burrow that, of course, cashes. But that's the kind of thing that I'm always looking at. I'm like, where are the popular plays, and how can I get similar ideas that are less out there? And if that happens to land on the type of player where Chase can actually make a case of why they're going to do well on a football field, I mean, by all means, then I'm all in.
All right, so let's go ahead and kick this episode off. And I mean, I don't want to dive into the chalk. Do you really want to dive into the chalk? Because I don't want to talk about the chalk. The chalk to me is boring as shit. Like, I don't want to sit there and talk about how Josh Allen could, perform up against, what is it, Atlanta. I don't want to talk about how Patrick Mahomes right now could perform against Cincinnati, Brady. Like, those are all boring to me. But there is one guy who had a great week last week, who comes in this week is somewhat questionable when it comes to the roster percentages because of how many teams are playing this week.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a ton.
Biggest slate of the year.
By far, so I mean, relatively close. I mean, this slate is massive, and they're all playing, for a reason because we now have 7 teams in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that being said, we see Dak Prescott over there.
Yeah.
And Dak Prescott, I mean, what do you expect his ownership to be at? Right around 12% or so?
I don't even know about that. I mean, we're in such a crazy spot, right? I mean, we have Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, right? And we have both quarterbacks in that game. So we have Allen against a terrible opponent. We have Brady against a terrible opponent. Then we have Mahomes and Burrow against each other. We have potentially Stafford and Lamar against each other. And then we have Dak and we have Dak and Kyler against each other. And then we have Hurts against a terrible opponent. And then Trey Lance. I mean, it looks like we're going to get Trey Lance starting, and he's only $4,800. So I'm assuming like Trey Lance is going to absorb upwards of 20% of the ownership.
Whew, you think it's going to be that high on this big of a slate?
I mean, he's $4,800. He's $3,200 less than Josh Allen. He's $2,000 less than Dak Prescott. Like I think it'll be pretty similar to like when Taysom Hill was against the Jets. Except that Lance actually has fun stacking partners. So and people want to play Lance. People are excited to play Lance. So I think that both quarterbacks in this game, like, it's hard for me to say what the ownership is going to be. But if there's anything I would love to know right now, it would be what the ownership will be on Dak and on Kyler, because I could easily see both quarterbacks in this game somehow falling under 10%, especially because of that show that Cincinnati just put on. I could see people being excited to play the KC Cincinnati game more so than the Arizona Dallas game.
Yeah, I could see, both happening relatively like easily, but it's still something as to where we could see some sort of stack happening from Dak Prescott because he did put on a big week. We could see some CeeDee Lamb in there. And I'm here to tell you that the best stack for Dak Prescott isn't with CeeDee Lamb. It's not with Michael Gallup. It's actually chasing the running back position. And I used to do all these handwritten studies, and this is the weirdest thing. I know it sounds strange, but it was something that I did back about 2 years ago where I went through and I logged about 3 years worth of handwritten content for myself where I studied the top positions over there where they finished at per week and if their running back was able to produce. And it was kind of funny because Josh Larkey just put out his podcast on DFS, and he talked about how over the past 5 seasons, and it reminded me, it just sparked me, and I don't have it because it was literally handwritten notes in a notebook. It took up like literally a third of my notebook that I was writing these stats down on because I didn't know how to use a computer at the time. So I'm not even kidding you. And so Josh brought up that 53% of the time, a quarterback that finished with above 5 points above what his fantasy finish is, the running back on the same team also finished with 5 points above what their average finish was. So he's like, I want to get a little more risque, right? I want to include the running backs, but I'm going to leave the quarterbacks at above 5 points from their average finish. And we're going to put running backs above their top, 10 points that are finished at that point. So there was 22.5% of the time that the quarterback finished with 5 points above their fantasy finish, like their average fantasy finish. Their running back finished with 10 points above their average fantasy finish. So the fact that we want to talk about running backs, right, not correlating to the quarterback is not true. And the study that I did actually showed that over 25% of the time that there was a Millie Maker contest over a 3-year period, the running back stack with the quarterback was the one that actually won the contest. 25% is actually 26 point something percent of the time. I don't have my notebook, like I said, but we're talking about a significant amount. And I went back and even dissected that. It was 10 routes run or more for the running back position with a 25% target share was 80% of that 26% of the time. So, in other words, running backs to catch passes that are part of a high-powered offense, that are part of a high-scoring offense in shootouts are the reason why you won 1/4 of the time. So I want to talk about this matchup with Dak Prescott, Tony Pollard, the Arizona Cardinals, and the explosive run rate that the Cardinals allow. Now, the Cardinals have
You're playing Pollard in DFS.
I'm playing Tony Pollard.
Oh, my gosh.
And I'm not a big Tony Pollard guy. I like Tony Pollard, but I'm not like...
I'm the Pollard guy, but I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole in the DFS contest. 15 games on the slate.
I understand that. And I think this is one of those things where you can escape from the chalk, right? And you can actually get the pass catching ability and his ability to create explosive runs. Mm-hmm. We've seen it. It's not, you don't even need an eye test to know. All you have to do is listen to the crowd every time they say that he hands the ball to Tony Pollard.
Oh yeah. You don't have to convince me about his juice. I know he's got the juice.
So Arizona, right? They bottle up running backs for the most part. We just saw it up against Jonathan Taylor. Right? They're able to confine running backs. However, the Arizona Cardinals thus far in the season have allowed a 15% explosive run rate average. Mm-hmm. 15% of their runs, they allow to go over 10 yards per carry. Meanwhile, they have been somewhat, decent up against pass catching running backs as of late. They rank, I believe, overall 19th up against pass catching running backs on the season. However, the past 2 games, right? They faced the Rams, the Lions, and the Colts without DeAndre Swift. There's no pass catching backs. They've had no reason to force teams to pass to their running backs in these situations. Meanwhile, Montgomery, prior to that, double-digit fantasy points. CMC, double-digit fantasy points, obviously. That's a given. Aaron Jones, double-digit fantasy points in the receiving game. David Johnson had 7.7. Elijah Mitchell had 9.3. Elijah Mitchell doesn't even catch passes, and he had 9.3 points in the receiving game for the 49ers. This is something to where, Pollard could absolutely pop off this week. And I know that he's risky. And I know it might be chasing the dragon. But come on, this is a game where it could be
close. Not close. No, because how's he going to get 30?
How's he going to get 30? By the explosive run rates, because he could break 2 or 3 runs off.
So if he breaks an explosive run, then how does Dak get 30?
By the receiving game, by the passes allowed. How many touchdowns do you think Dallas is going to score in this matchup?
Well, at most, you'd expect. Based 5. On their implied team total, you'd think about maybe 4 is hopeful. Let's say 5. In the assumption that Dallas stack is what you need to win the DFS lineup, then let's say 5.
So 1 receiving touchdown, 1 running touchdown. The rushing touchdown is going to come off a big play. He's going to have 2 other.
Well, has to, because he's never going to get a goal line carry.
Yeah, he will never get a goal line carry. This is all explosive plays. All explosive plays is what I'm looking at.
So it's an explosive play that takes. Okay, how about this? If you're banking on an explosive play from Tony Pollard in this game, and you're banking on an 80-yard touchdown run from Tony Pollard, then why would I not play Pollard with Kyler instead of Dak? Because now that's an 80-yard play that puts Kyler right back on the football field.
Because the Dallas defense has been great at forcing turnovers, and because Kyler Murray's options are limited in the passing game. Now, I do like Christian Kirk, which you're going to talk about in a bit.
You're telling me that the Dallas defense is awesome. You're telling me that Tony Pollard is going to break an explosive run, but then you're also telling me that out of 30 quarterbacks, I should play the quarterback whose defense is going to shut down the other team and whose running back is going to run for an 80-yard touchdown?
I didn't say shut down the team, though. I said it's going to limit the passing ability and the rushing ability to an extent of the other team, but they're still going to remain competitive. And Kyler Murray is somebody who can still end up, producing, but I think there's going to be a lot of turnovers in this game. I think it's going to be a game where Dallas is going to have multiple opportunities to break off big runs. So even if the rate comes down, they're still going to have chances to break off big runs. With Ezekiel on his knees and the way that everything's going with him, I don't see them using him heavily over the last 2 games of the season going into the playoffs, where they most likely won't have the bye week to rest Ezekiel Elliott. I think that they're going to hold off on rushing Ezekiel too often, and Tony Pollard will take advantage of this porous defense up front, the Swiss cheese defensive line that teams have just been breaking off big runs against, and he's going to see the volume in the passing game because guess what? They're going to shut down the slot position over there with Byron Murphy, which I'll get to in a second.
Here's my issue with Pollard. All right, everybody knows I love Tony Pollard. He's literally my profile photo, okay? He has 1 game this year more than 4 catches. 1. All right, it's not like stacking Justin Herbert with Austin Eckler. Also, because of his snap rate, which is usually about 40%, 35 to 40%. He has not had over 17 fantasy points since week 2. And in terms of touchdowns, he has scored 0 receiving touchdowns this entire year. And he has scored 2 rushing touchdowns this entire year. Yep. He has scored half as many touchdowns on kick returns than rushing. You should stack Tony Pollard with the Dallas defense in hopes that Tony Pollard gets a kick return touchdown and then you get double points for that. That's your actual stacking partner. Okay, so instead of Tony Pollard, my favorite running back in the National Football League, at 40% of the snaps.
Please don't tell me you're going to play Zeke.
At $5,900. No, absolutely not. At $5,900, here's a list of other running backs within $300 of Tony Pollard that I can play. Listen to how many of them. Okay, Ronald Jones against the Jets. Josh Jacobs, who's getting a lot more pass catching these days. Rashad Penny against the Lions. Saquon Barkley. Elijah Mitchell. DeAndre Swift, potentially. Antonio Gibson. Darrell Williams. Sony Michel. Chase Edmonds in this game. Or Jeff Wilson if Elijah Mitchell doesn't go. Devin Singletary, who's been getting like 80% of the snaps. All these guys are going to play like double the amount of snaps as Tony Pollard, and there's so many of them that some of them aren't going to be owned. There's not ownership for who's going to play.
I told y'all this. By the way, I told y'all this is going to be a great argument between the two of us. I'm just saying because we come from complete opposite end of the spectrum. This is always going to be a great argument.
Who's going to play? Who's going to play DeAndre Swift if he plays in his first game off injury? Like anybody, I think he would be like 2% owned, and he gets Seattle, which is absolute
one of the worst teams up against pass catching
running backs. Absolute gift. I mean, I'd way rather play DeAndre Swift. Who's going to play Elijah Mitchell against Houston in his first game back from injury? Anybody? I mean, maybe Jeff Wilson's the starter now. I don't know. Maybe it's a split. Maybe he goes back to the role he's had every other game that he's played, and then he's an absolute smash play. I mean, I think people are going to play Rojo. Or you go up. I mean, David Montgomery, $6,500 against the Giants. He'll be popular-ish. People don't like to play David Montgomery. So how popular is he really going to be? I just think there's going to be so many options of guys that I can get with lower. I mean, if I'm going to take my shot on a timeshare guy, why not Javonte Williams against the Chargers?
So I love all your points, right? They make sense. They check out. I see a lot of these guys the same way that you see Tony Pollard, which is, hey, his ceiling is limited. I somewhat disagree, and this is why I somewhat disagree, is because of the fact that we have Dallas in a situation where they don't play 2 tight end sets. It's almost never now. They started the season, they played some 2 tight end sets.
Yeah, Jarwin's on IR now.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen. And we talked about how the Cardinals, right, on defense, they struggle up against teams that play 2 tight end sets because Byron Murphy, he moves to the outside. And then he's forced to cover these guys, which is why Arizona has allowed such a high explosive play rate over the past 4 or 5 games, is because of the fact that they allow these massive plays up against a slow slot cornerback, because that slow slot cornerback should not be playing on the outside. He's gotten demolished on the outside. Then we see him move back to the slot this past week because Jack Doyle got hurt. And how many series was that? Because I was pissed because I had so much Jack Doyle in underdog. Immediately. I was livid.
If you're a Colt and you block dudes, you got hurt within the first quarter of the game.
Oh man, it was terrible. It was terrible. But anyways,
Mo had that big catch after Jack Doyle left.
He had 2 catches for like 42 yards or something. I was so pissed. I don't know if you saw my underdog post, but I ran out these lineups on underdog, and I had like 5 or 6 of them.
You were playing baby hands Doyle?
I had a combination of Doyle and Njoku because I couldn't get my shares of Mark Andrews on the Saturday slate. Was it Mark Andrews? No, it was
Zach Ertz was like Zach the only tight end on that.
Yeah, slate. Zach Ertz. He was the only tight end, and I couldn't get a hold of him. So I took a ton of Njoku and Jack Doyle shares, and I finished in the top 100 in every single one of my lineups except for one. But I had Njoku and Jack Doyle, and I didn't have any other tight end. It was just those 2. Yeah. So I was left with nothing. Anyways, I don't want to reminisce too much because it's painful.
But played Harrison Bryant.
Oh, God, I almost did in one lineup, but I was like, no, Njoku. It's going to be Njoku. All right. So, anyways, Byron Murphy's going to move back to the slot. And just like he did this past week, Byron Murphy only allowed 8 yards receiving while covering the slot on 18 snaps. He's going to do that again to CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb's very good, and I think CeeDee Lamb can still end up outworking Byron Murphy to get 30, 40 yards or so. Maybe 5 receptions. But I don't think he's going to get much more than that. Byron Murphy's going to contain him. That's going to leave opportunities on the outside. However, the Arizona Cardinals are only allowing, aside from this past 5 weeks when Byron Murphy's been playing more on the outside, when they play their normal nickel back situation, they've only allowed, I believe, the 5th least explosive plays to wide receivers. So Michael Gallup's out of the question. Like, they don't allow the Michael Gallups of the world to produce in this matchup. That's going to leave Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper's going to see a ton of volume. Outside of that, they're going to shut down CeeDee Lamb. They're going to shut down Gallup. They're going to shut down the tight end position. It's just what the Cardinals do when they are able to play nickelback sets. And that's why they're so porous up against the pass-catching running backs. And that's why I like, in this situation, Tony Pollard to see a couple explosive play rates and his ability to
You don't want to play Zeke for the explosive plays?
You know,
I think explosiveness.
I like Zeke. Yeah, exactly. That's why I know that you don't. So I know you're literally making my point for me as to where Zeke is not explosive. You see the explosive play rates coming from Tony Pollard. I think that they might dial back on his carry, and I think that Tony Pollard could see 60% snap share minimum in this matchup.
He hasn't done that all year.
He hasn't. This is the end of the year. We're talking about a little bit of a situation.
I would support it. I support any and all Pollard. But look, we've devoted so much time talking about a running back that's going to have 0.1% ownership because he plays 40% of the snaps.
Hey, Amari Cooper is part of this argument.
Sorry?
Amari Cooper is part of this argument. That's my other stack that I want to
Okay, I'm fine with Cooper. I'm fine with Cooper. But here's my point. I'm going to play the other side of the game because Dallas just came off of embarrassing the Washington football team, like emasculated the Washington football team on national television. They ripped their dick off of their groin and threw it in the garbage. Like, the Washington football team doesn't even exist anymore. They already didn't have a name, but now they don't even have a team because of what Dallas.
So that's going to be the show tonight, guys. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, Chase is a Washington fan. If anybody doesn't know that. Anyway, what a game. Anyhow, right, people are going to want to play Dak. And then Kyler was also in an island game in which they looked like a poorly coached, absolute mess, losing to the Colts at home, who didn't even have half of their team on the COVID list. And the week before that, they lost to the Lions. So, like, coming from this, from my perspective, I don't care about the football part. I don't care about the X's and O's. I'm just looking at what I think other people are going to do. And when I'm looking at the two big games with the highest totals in the slate, right, and we're going to talk about KC and Cincinnati, I assume, later, you know, they had Joe Burrow looked phenomenal. Patrick Mahomes came through, had a really good game against Pittsburgh. Dak came through, had a massive breakout or re-breakout game, whatever it was, against Washington. Kyler was the dud, right? And the other issue with this Arizona team, why I think this game catches less ownership than the KC-Cincy game, is because in KC-Cincy, it's very easy to make the stacks. If you want to play Burrow, who do you playing with? Chase, Higgins, right? Maybe you can do Chase Boyd or Higgins Boyd, but probably going to do Chase Higgins. If you want to play KC, who do you play him with? Well, you play him with pick one of Kelsey or Hill, right? And then maybe add in Pringle. Or you're going to play him, I think what most people do this week with CEH out, was they'll play Mahomes plus Darrell Williams and then one of Kelsey or Hill, right? It's very easy. Whereas in these games, I mean, we just talked about the Dallas side. There's Zeke, there's Pollard, there's Schultz, there's Lamb, there's Cooper, there's Gallup. Like, you can be right, and Dak can be the highest scoring quarterback on the slate, and you can be so wrong in so many different directions about what weapons to pick that I just find it maddening to play these Dak stacks. Like, I don't know why they keep forcing Dalton Schultz into our lives, but they are insistent upon this guy. Like, he will not go away. And so it's like I have to play Dak, and then I feel like I have to play Schultz, or I have to pick one of the three wide receivers. It's just too hard for me for a guy that's going to be more owned. With Kyler now, without Hopkins in the mix, I mean, it's easier. Rondale Moore has no ceiling, right? None. He's running these little gadget routes, so even if he plays, I'm not worried about it. The running backs 50-50 split if Connor comes back. And so it's easy. If Edmonds gets the bell cow roll again, I just play Edmonds in every lineup with Kyler. And if he doesn't, then I get to avoid because I'm just hoping they don't steal rushing touchdowns. Anton Wesley is a wind sprinter. He doesn't get targets on his routes except for the one tilting end zone target last week. So basically that leaves me with Kirk and Ertz and Green. And like, people just don't enjoy playing these guys because they burn people in the past. They're not sexy. They're not Chase. They're not Higgins. Like, I just feel like I'm going to roll out Kyler and I'll just rotate two of Kirk and Ertz and Green. And I feel like I'm going to be able to get all of them at pretty decent ownership. You know, and then I got to try and figure out a freaking run back from the Dallas Cowboys, which is a pain in the ass. But I do think it's easier to get to the Cardinal stack, and I think it's easier to get the Cardinal stack at lower ownership. Whereas I feel like I can play Kirk or Kyler, Christian Kirk, Zach Ertz, and I'm not sure I'll have any of those players above like 10, 12% owned. Whereas I feel like if I play Lamb and Dak and Cooper, something like that, now I feel like I'm going to hit like 15+% owned on Dak and Lamb, and all the touchdowns go to Gallup and Schultz, or they could throw their freaking offensive linemen.
No, I mean, so this is kind of interesting, right? Because, it's like, hey, what do we do whenever we play the Cowboys, right? We play the slot receiver, and that's still Christian Kirk, although he has, taken over the primary receiver role. It's actually been AJ Green that has, but Christian Kirk is still playing the same slot role that he has.
Yeah, he's just getting more targets because we replaced DeAndre Hopkins, who actually earns targets, with Anton Wesley, who doesn't.
Yeah, and it's Jordan Lewis. And Jordan Lewis, if you listen to the show, I mean, I've gotten in trouble for what I've said about Jordan Lewis on the show because he's so bad. I mean, I can't even go into what I've said before.
Well, Kirk is the free play this week. It's Kirk and Ertz. Those are the two stacks then. It's Kirk and Ertz, and we let Green sit there with Trayvon Diggs.
Yeah, we don't play. No. We don't play. No way we're playing AJ Green in this matchup. No way. We're not playing that. I think that Trayvon Diggs probably
AJ Green. I'm going to roll out some dusty AJ Green for sure this weekend.
I mean, there's no way that Trayvon Diggs doesn't go up against AJ Green, right? Like I know he does move to the slot from time to time, but he's not going to become a full-time slot guy up against Christian Kirk. There's no way.
I don't know, man. What if he beats Trayvon on that end zone fade? Dusty AJ Green. What if nobody plays him? Who's going to play AJ Green?
It's possible. It's possible. But I do want to explore, actually, because you are talking about this. I mean, you're talking about the end zone fade. I mean, who's been the receiver who's seen 4 red zone targets over the past 2 weeks? Although he hasn't caught one. He's not very good at football. I mean, he almost caught one. And I think he almost caught 2, actually. But yes, it is Antoine Wesley.
Yeah, where he got a touchdown against the Colts.
He's 6. Yeah, he did get a touchdown. He's 6'4", right? And he's going to be faced against likely Noah Brown, who I think is 5'10". He has no strength.
I'll play Wesley. I have no shame.
I was thinking about sneaking Wesley into your slot receiver if you're desperate. Like if you're trying to play a high loaded.
I haven't looked at Anton Wesley's price.
It's bad. Now. I had it up a little bit ago.
3,600. Okay.
Yeah, all you need is a touchdown. He pays off. He's seen 4 red zone targets. 4.
I'm into this. Anton Wesley, Christian Kirk. Okay. Plug in Kyler. And then I'll play Schultz because people are going to play Ertz with Kyler. So no one's going to have Schultz in their Kyler lineups. Right? Like these people are going to play Ertz with Kyler.
So I'm off Schultz. I like Schultz a lot, but Schultz is very matchup dependent. If you go back and you look at all this stuff, it's like, okay.
He had like 1 catch against Washington, and then he had 1 million points against Washington.
Yes, but that's because Washington was healthy and they're not healthy. Also, their defensive line is punching each other, and that whole thing was a mess. Actually, the funny part is I'm a Washington fan, but I had food poisoning throughout the entire thing. So I got
so
you
remember
pissed.
The team?
I started taking shots of Rumple and I passed out. No, I actually did have food poisoning, although I did have shots of Rumple right before that too. Anyways, no, so I think that Zach Ertz is worth checking out as well in this matchup. Dallas hasn't been good up against tight ends. They've been okay. It's somebody who's been a release valve who has seen targets. But let's move on to the next one before we spend literally an hour talking about
Cowboys,
one game.
Cardinals stuff.
Yeah, and that's a matchup that you brought up earlier, and that's a Matt Stafford stack, which,
that's interesting.
Hey, this could be obvious, right?
34 kilometer-hour winds and rain in Baltimore on Sunday.
That's what it's projected as. And I've done this whole weather thing so many times, and it always disappoints. Because I write my articles right on Wednesday. I start writing them on Wednesday, and I take the weather and I incorporate weather, and then I realize, hey, it doesn't. I incorporated the weather last year because I would do my reports on Saturday, and they were somewhat accurate. This year, I'm doing it on Wednesday. There's no chance. Useless. There's no chance.
I'm hoping you're right, man, because I'm sweating I got my Puppy 2 finalist out here chasing 100K, and I have Stafford, Kupp, and Andrews and Bateman all on that team. And I went to check the forecast because I'm a degenerate, and I saw this wind, I saw this rain. I was like, we got to cut this shit out. We do not want this.
I'm proposing this as if the weather isn't that bad. Okay,
weather isn't that bad. All right, let's do it.
I'm proposing this. So what if you talked about fading Cooper Kupp last week and playing Sonny Michel, right?
Yeah,
and it worked. And by the way, Cooper Kupp made me sick because he started catching all those passes in the fourth quarter.
He got to the bonus late. He got to the bonus real late.
Oh, it killed me. It killed all my lineups and everything. That was part of the reason why I couldn't win money because, I had 0 points for my tight end position, but also Cooper Kupp caught at the end. Anyways, what if Van Jefferson, who saw 6 targets last week, he only had 1 reception, right? But he had 6 targets last week.
Van Jefferson, yeah.
Meanwhile, you had Odell Beckham, who I think saw 8 targets with 5
8
receptions.
Targets, 437 and a TD.
Okay. Yeah. It wasn't great. He salvaged his day with the TD.
Yeah.
But what if both those guys up against the Baltimore Ravens, who have a completely depleted secondary, dominate on the outside and are able to take advantage of some deep plays that Matthew Stafford used to throw accurately, still can. But what if you fade Cooper Kupp? I know it's ballsy. You brought up Galaxy Brain way earlier in the episode.
Yeah, you play Stafford with no Kupp.
Stafford with no Kupp, and you go Van Jefferson and Odell Beckham, or you go either one of those receivers with maybe Tyler Higbee, who's 3rd in the NFL in red zone targets.
Yeah, I don't hate this. I've been doing this I've been doing this with no success for pretty much the entire year. Where especially since they basically swapped Beckham into Woods, I've had a Stafford no Kupp lineup I think every week, because my theory is it's like all of Van Jefferson's targets, like Van Jefferson every week has 2 options. He either catches a 60-yard bomb touchdown or he has like 1 catch for 5 yards. Like that, those are the 2 options because he has this obscenely large ADOT. Like his ADOT is like 18 yards. Like it's constant downfield targets, right?
It's Sean Jackson, type ADOT.
Yeah. So Van Jefferson, like you have to look at him like his projection is meaningless. Like his median projection is meaningless because it's just the middle of 2 outcomes, right? He's either going to have 20 points or 25 points, or if he happens to catch 2 long ones, he could have 30 points, or he's going to have 0 points.
By the way, that's how you accurately rank on Fantasy Pros. Whenever you have a boomer bust player, you just put them right in the middle, so that way you can never be too wrong or too right.
Yeah. So like if you're logging your optimizer and you're like, oh man, Van Jefferson is projected for like 11.2 median points, like that's totally meaningless. You know what you're getting with Van.
We're playing tournaments,
right? And then Odell. I mean, what I love about Odell is he's been used a lot in the red zone and towards the end zone since getting there. I don't know if it's because they want to prove a point or what it is, but they've let Odell run a lot of these ISO routes in the red zone, and he's been very successful. He's been very successful getting open against man coverage, which he was also successful at doing in Cleveland, by the way.
Yes, he just never got the ball.
But anyway, he's gotten these ISO routes in goal-to-go situations, and he's winning on them, and he's getting touchdowns. And so my theory about this is like, okay, how do we get the best version of a Matthew Stafford performance? It's like he has to throw all these touchdowns. A lot of Odell's getting as many end zone targets as Cooper Kupp, so I don't mind taking a shot on Odell for the touchdowns. And then best case scenario for Stafford for the whole game. I mean, Van Jefferson is the guy who lifts game stacks because the whole game stack gets better if you happen to get the 65-yard Van bomb. So
yeah, it's the same thing with MVS. It's the same thing with
Van. So yeah, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to run like Stafford, Van, Odell, and it kind of depends on who plays quarterback for the Ravens. Like if it's Huntley, then I'm probably just going to stick with Andrews, even though the Rams defend the tight end very well. If it's Lamar, I'm probably going to go to Hollywood Brown or Bateman. But Huntley just like exclusively throws to Mark Andrews. He doesn't know that anyone else plays for the Baltimore Ravens.
I think the key here is how the Rams defend the tight end position, which once again, if you listen to my show, you know what I'm going to say about the Rams is Jalen Ramsey, he plays off coverage and they allow underneath receivers to get the yardage. And we saw it again last week. But I mean, like Marquise Brown, right? Like he has not been playing.
Marquise Brown is Deontay Johnson now.
He's worse, but it's better in this matchup. Because we talked about Randall Cobb, right? Like on Wednesday's show. We talked about how these underneath slot receivers, they allow them to get yards, and if they can shake one tackle, they're off to the races. And Marquise Brown has had one of the worst average depth of targets I've ever seen.
They've turned like Marquise Brown, he used to be in the Van Jefferson role. All of a sudden he's like rookie year Jarvis Landry.
It's absolutely absurd. And they're what's happened is they're creating plays where the quarterback can elongate the plays. And so Marquise Brown is only running out like 12 to 15 yards and he's coming back. He's not keeping running because he's afraid that they're not going to be able to get him the ball. So he's coming back to the ball. And so he's getting balls underneath. But this could actually work out very, very well. He's getting balls underneath the whole time. No, but this is a situation as to where we could see, Marquise Brown excel in this role where they allow him to have space. He could end up making a couple moves and beating the guys to the end zone on the edge. And I like Marquise Brown, regardless of who plays quarterback, because if it's Lamar Jackson, we're going to see the deep targets. But I'd rather see the underneath targets because the Rams don't allow deep targets. They don't. They're one of the best teams at stopping explosive pass plays. So I'd much rather see Marquise Brown get that volume underneath and see him break away one or two passes or one or two receptions for deep runs. But I don't think that's going to happen regularly, which is why I don't want to hop on the Ravens side of things. I'd much rather play the chalk, but instead of playing the chalk with Cooper Kupp, I like to play the two receivers, run it back with Marquise Brown. Meanwhile, as Mark Andrews averaged up the target, means that he should be seeing a ton of Jalen Ramsey in coverage, which I don't think is advantageous for Mark Andrews. Jalen Ramsey typically does a good job at defending bigger players because he can be more physical with them.
I like it.
All right. So
I like it. Here's my take on this on this from the opposite angle of what Chase talks about, right? Chase talks about all this football stuff. Here's my angle on why I would play the exact stack that Chase mentioned. Okay. This week, Cooper Kupp, I imagine, like every week, it's gonna have a lot of ownership, right? Yep. So is Tyreek Hill. Okay. So what people aren't going to be able to do is play Cooper Kupp or Tyreek Hill in the same lineup as Jonathan Taylor without playing Trey Lance. Okay? Just you can't make the money work. If you play Kupp and you play Taylor, you're almost certainly going to play Lance at $4,800. And so what I imagine is there's going to be very little Taylor in these stacks of Rams-Ravens and of Chiefs-Bengals. And so what I would like to do is take Taylor, and then I would like to play some combination of the other game, right, of the Chiefs-Bengals game, whether that be getting Darrell Williams in there, whether that be getting Tyreek Hill in there, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, something like that. And then I'll play this scaled-down Ram stack with Odell and Van, maybe you throw in a Higbee and Marquise Brown. And I think that allows you to get unique access to Taylor, or if you don't like Taylor, if you want to play Eckler or whatever. But I think that's essentially your way to play chalk pieces. This is something that I always really look at. It's like people, I think, look at the chalks strictly in terms of players. And I always look at it in terms of lineups, right? So I'm okay taking chalk pieces, but if I can build lineups uniquely, right? So if a lot of people are going to play the Rams and a lot of people are going to play Taylor, but if I don't play Kupp, right, then I get this nice mix. And so I can get Taylor into a Rams lineup without having to play Lance. And if I do that kind of lineup, I would go all the way to the next level, and I do something like play Houston defense, because I would look at it and say, okay, people are going to play Lance with Taylor and Kupp. So I will play Stafford, Van, Odell with Taylor, and I'll play the Texans defense that will help correlate negatively to the Lance lineups.
So, it's funny, that same article I talked about at the very beginning of the show, right, where I was studying, Millie Maker lineups. Essentially, the majority of the Millie Maker lineups ended up between 6.3%, 8.5%. I'll never forget that number. Ownership for your entire roster. So it doesn't matter how you get to that gap of 6.3 to 8.5. That's where the majority of it lies in that section, in that little gap. So even if you have a guy at 15%, if you have a guy at 4%, it will end up averaging out to an extent. So you talked about it, man. You talked about a unique way to get there. And that's where I'm going to bring up something that might be a little bit unique, something that you might shun right away.
All right, what backup running back are you going to hype now?
No, it's not a backup running back.
Okay.
It's a backup quarterback, actually. But it's not Trey Lance.
Okay.
Somebody right around the same price range, slightly more expensive, actually, but way less ownership. Davis Mills. Mills tore up the Chargers. Okay. And now he has the 49ers who got ruined.
Suck on the outside.
They're so bad. They got ruined. And over the past 5 games, they're 28th in passes allowed of over 20 yards. It feels like it's one of those sneaky plays where you could lock both him and Brandon Cooks in to 10, 15% of the lineups that you put in this week, maybe more, depending on how many lineups you play, and hope for a little bit of an outlier week, because even if you play Cooks and Davis and I'm going to piggyback off of what you were just saying in terms of the salary percentages. When you pile up Cooks and Davis, they only account for 20.3% of your salary. So you're able to line up. I'm going to give you an example of a lineup with Stafford and Kupp in it, right? So Stafford, Kupp, Freeman, and Mike Davis. Devonta Freeman, Mike Davis.
You're not playing Mike Davis, dude.
I'm just giving you an example. Somebody
we're not
around
playing Mike Davis.
Okay.
Who
else is around Mike Davis? Give me somebody else while I'm coming up with this. Give me somebody else. Or do you have that?
There's just a blank space actually where Mike Davis would be on my DraftKings app. I don't get to ever see him. No, Michael Carter is the same price as Mike Davis.
Okay, so
Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the not matchup. That's your option right there, Michael Carter.
Okay, so Stafford, Kupp, Freeman, and Carter. And I'm using Freeman because he's a run back for Stafford Kupp. Just as an example. All right, and then we have Davis Mills, we have Brandon Cooks, we have AJ Brown, and we have Jonathan Taylor. At this point, I mean, can you really argue that the Matthew Stafford lineup is better in terms of ownership than possibly rolling out Davis Mills and Brandon Cooks?
What's Mills' ceiling at? What did he get?
22 points,
24.4 fantasy. No, actually, he back in week 5, he had 27.7.
But I'm looking at him at 22 points. That's pretty much what I'm looking at.
Okay, so he is capable. He's hit 300 passing yards 3 times. And he has hit 3 passing touchdowns once, 2 touchdowns twice. Okay, so it's possible. He has 303 in his range. I don't hate this. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to get to Mills' lineup solely because there's just so many good quarterback plays. Like we're going to see where the ownership lines up, but it's just impossible. Like all the guys I mentioned, right? Like with Lance soaking up so much ownership, with us then looking at Stafford, whoever's playing quarterback for the Ravens, Burrow, Mahomes, Allen, Brady, Dak, and Kyler. Like one of those guys is going to be under 5%, just like by the way the math gets. And so it's like if I can get one of those guys at 5%, am I really going to play Davis Mills? But I don't hate it.
Hey, you already brought up the fact that if you roll out Davis Mills, you could probably roll out Jonathan Taylor and Cooper Kupp.
You absolutely can't.
100%. Like, and it's easy. Like, it's not even difficult. I'm rolling out Cooks, AJ Brown, and Jonathan Taylor, who were all, priced, not significantly high, but, decently enough outside of Jonathan Taylor, who is significantly high. I mean, this is a lineup that could absolutely crush if Davis Mills hits 25 points, 26 points. I'm assuming he's going to hit 20 to 22, which is fine because I can make up points in other places. I mean, we're not talking about a quarterback, maybe if you get lucky, a quarterback putting up 40 points, and then all of a sudden they have to have the perfect lineup after that because they have to play, all these 4K, 3K plays. You're not going to have to do that with Davis Mills.
Okay, you convinced me enough on Mills with one condition, which the condition being is that if we get a Tyler Huntley start, then I'm not playing Davis Mills because Huntley's only $100 more, and I'll just play Huntley.
Wait, is it going to be Huntley or is it going to be Ellinger?
No, Huntley for the Ravens.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Like I'm saying, like so with the new COVID restrictions, Huntley's going to be active, and I don't know if we're going to get Lamar or not. But if we don't get Lamar and we get Huntley for the Ravens, then I can just do the exact same Stafford lineup, but just flip it in that same game. And then I get Huntley, who is going to score 1 million points because he's the absolute GOAT. And he scored 36 points his last start.
He did. And I can't argue with the points that he scored. But, I mean, is that going to be consistent every single week?
Yeah, because he runs.
He does. I want to take a chance at Davis Mills.
He has 13. So in 3 games, and one of them isn't even a full game, he has 26 carries. So he's averaging 9 carries a game. And he's averaging about 6-7 yards a carry. So, I mean, we're basically starting with a touchdown and a half just on the ground. And he can run in touchdowns, too. I mean, Huntley, the floor is so high, and the ceiling's there because he actually does throw. Like, he threw for 219, 270, 215. I mean, that's more than Lance is going to throw for, I think.
Yeah, most likely. And Lance is going to be a chalk play.
And you can play Huntley Brown that you wanted to play, right? So you can play Huntley, Marquise Brown, Van Jefferson, or you could play, you can play Kupp at that point if you want to. You have plenty of salary to do it.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. And that's something definitely to take in consideration.
What if you play Huntley, Marquise Brown, and Van Jefferson, and you do like the ultimate cheap stack of that game, and it preserves you enough salary that you can play probably Tyreek Hill, or actually, I guess what I would probably play is I'd probably play Darrell Williams and one of the Bengals receivers.
See, that would be a cash lineup for me. Like, I would love to roll out in cash nonstop. I would roll out in cash every single fucking time.
Yeah, but why would in cash with like a stacked lineup like that? What would be what's wrong with this in tournament? You're not playing Van Jefferson in cash.
I would for the matchup purposes because you're able to play the other players to make up for it. I mean, anything that Van Jefferson gets at this point is just bonus points, right?
Yeah, but you can play like Christian Kirk at the same freaking price range. Who has like 1 million targets.
Yeah, he's a great cash play too. Don't get me wrong.
Look, if you play, what would be wrong with this lineup? If I play Higgins, well, actually I play Chase because everyone's gonna play Higgins because he just lit the world on fire. All right, if I play Chase and Darrell Williams, Huntley, Marquise Brown, Van Jefferson. I mean, the ownership on Brown and Jefferson is going to be low. Chase and Williams are going to be owned, but then it's like I get access to both games, and I still have like quite a lot of salary left over, and I can actually do some things with it.
I mean, it makes sense. So we have 4 lineups now, right? 4 bases for people to understand for DFS. I know you wanted to talk about the Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes matchup. So let's hop on that one before we hop onto the running backs. We'll make it all quick. From here on out, if you're down for that, I mean, we can take our time. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
we're just hanging out talking. I don't really care.
Let's talk about that game. I'm probably not going to play a lot of this game with the caveat that it really comes down to the ownership. Like if you're going to tell me this game won't be the most owned on the slate, then I'll play a lot of it. But if I had to guess, I think it will be the most owned on the slate, just based on.
And I'm not a big fan of this matchup. I wouldn't play it.
Yeah, that's kind of like I don't really care about the matchup, but I care about it. I see enough risk factors with this matchup that if it's drawing a ton of ownership, I'm quite content fading it, and I also see like easy plays that I can make that would fade it. So, to me, reasons I don't love this game from a game theory perspective. It's too easy to stack, right? Like, there's not that many ways to play this game uniquely. So it's not like the Cowboys-Dallas game where there's a million other guys. And that's a blessing and a curse with those Dak lineups, right? It's nice to have the Burrow situation where you just stack them with Chase and Higgins. You don't have to think about it. But the problem is that I love Burrow, and I've been playing a lot of Burrow this year. He's low owned because it's like, okay, if Burrow's 3% owned and you get him with Chase and Higgins and they all go off, then they're all under owned. And awesome, right? Like then I have this really unique lineup that nobody else has, and it's fantastic. It's all correlated. The problem is when they get super owned. I mean, if Burrow's like 10% this week and Chase and Higgins end up being like 15%, well, the problem is like everybody that has those three all has those three together, and so it just creates this cluster. So to me, if you're going to play this game, like I think you have to consider Boyd. I think you have to consider Uzama in your Bengal stacks. And then, the Chiefs, I think it's just too easy to go Mahomes plus Darrell plus pick one of Hill or Kelsey. And the issue is I just don't really want to play anybody else. Like Hardman is explosive and he gets these gadget plays, but he doesn't run enough routes to really crack like 25, 30 points. Like his best game's going to be like 15. Pringle, I don't know. Am I going to play Pringle or do I really trust Byron Pringle? And then I look at the running backs, and I love both running backs in this game. I mean, Darrell Williams is an absolute nut play. I expect him to be very high owned, but I'm still, that's like chalk I'm willing to eat if I'm eating a popular running back that fades a popular game because he's taking touchdowns away from all the popular receivers. And then Mixon, the last like 3 weeks, he's been really under owned, and he's also mostly under delivered until last week. But I don't think people like to play Mixon. People don't like to live in his range at running back. I think people are either going to spend down to the Darrell Williams, Sony Michel, Ronald Jones, Antonio Gibson, those type guys, or they'll spend all the way up, to Taylor, maybe to Eckler. And I think we could see Mixon go a little bit less owned. And the best thing about Mixon is that the Bengals are just Jekyll and Hyde team. Like they either come out, they establish the shit out of Joe Mixon, or they come out and throw it a ton. And against the Chiefs, I mean, what we've seen is that if the Bengals don't fear another team's pass rush, that they will come out and throw it because they know they can win downfield. But they don't trust their O-line to hold up. And it seems like when they are worried about the pass rush that they convert to this run-heavy team. And I could see the Chiefs applying pressure in Arrowhead this week. It's in Cincinnati. But I could still see the Chiefs being able to apply pressure this week. And I could see the Bengals going into that Mixon mode. And I think Mixon could have success against the Chiefs. So I could see a scenario where I'm just going to play the running backs, or I'll play the defenses, and I won't get as much on the pass catchers. But where are you at from more the football side of things?
So the Bengals as a whole, like they are one of the worst teams at game scripting. If you watch their first drives, like all right, so the Texans, the exact opposite. The Texans, their game script when they come out, they fire on all cylinders, especially as of late. As long as the game plan goes like
Adam
accordingly.
Gase used to be the world's best scripter too. He scored on every opening drive.
It's so weird, right? And then they suck the rest of the game because everything's game scripted, everything falls, and they have no backup plan. And their quarterbacks aren't given any freedom, so they can't make alterations while in the game. And then the whole halftime speech is why you guys suck. I'm assuming. I don't know that, but I'm assuming you guys suck. You all need to pick it up.
Except last week when the Texans walloped the Chargers.
Well, that's because everything went according to plan for once. Not just the first drive, but I'm talking about the first 2 or 3 drives. Everything went according to plan. Yeah. See, that was so strange. I get it because the Chargers are terrible at defending the run. They have not been able to defend the pass ever since the injuries have occurred, and Justin Herbert hasn't had to play catch up in multiple games this season. And when he is asked to do that, he's not very good. He makes a lot of mistakes. Anyways, back to the Bengals game.
Yeah.
Once they break their mold, they allow Joe Burrow to take over. And that's great. But he also is okay with allowing Joe Mixon to run the ball. He's very unselfish, which is kind of strange coming from a quarterback who has seen 50-plus passing attempts in multiple occasions. But they almost allow him to take over to an extent. I don't know if that's Cliff Kingsbury. I don't know if that's Joe Burrow. I don't know if it's offensive coordinator as a whole. I don't know if it's the organization. We don't know because, like you brought up, we don't know what they're going to do. Like, they're so mysterious. It's like whoosh.
Look at 2 weeks ago. They played the friggin' Broncos. They look like the worst team in the NFL. They scored 15 points. And they only scored a single touchdown because nobody covered Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, but I'm talking about even game script dependent. Like, we don't know what they're going to do. We don't know if this is Joe Mixon's biggest receiving game, maybe of his career, but definitely of this season. We were hoping for 4 receptions for Joe Mixon back, this entire season outside of this week. So I think this is a situation that I want to avoid regardless, because I know that you can depend on certain things, but the Chiefs are a team that can force turnovers. The Bengals are a team that can force turnovers. And we can see this be a very low-scoring game overall as teams go back and forth without forcing as many turnovers or as many touchdowns as we'd like to see. Meanwhile, you brought this up pre-show. We can see these defenses scoring just as often as the offense is scoring. Patrick Mahomes, sure, he's been great, over the past 2 weeks, but he still is turnover-worthy to an extent.
Yeah, even turnover-worthy plays have been off the charts this year. And Burrow chucks a lot of picks, too.
Yeah, he does. Both of them are at the top of the charts. I don't really want to touch this game. I thought you were going to give me some insight as to why I want to jump on this game. So,
the reason why you jump on this game is the reason why I think it'll be popular, which is that there's a lot of great playmakers in this game, and there's a total of 49, and it has a tight spread. And so I think that if you give me a game, if you give me a game with a total of 49 and a tight spread with a lot of playmakers, I'm usually going to be excited. I just think people are going to be too excited because of the recency bias of what we just saw with the Bengals. Like I've been doing these underdog playoff drafts, and I wrote up the Bengals as one of my favorite late stack options.
Amazing.
Last week, right when I did my article on solving the gauntlet, I said, look, if you're going to do the Bengals, like no one's taking these Bengals at all because no one thinks that they're going to make the playoffs. But if they beat the COVID-depleted Ravens, then they're going to be in the playoffs for sure, right? Higgins was literally never drafted. Chase was drafted sometimes. Mixon was usually drafted really late. Burrow was never drafted. And I was saying a lot of people are just one-offing Mixon. I was like, don't do this because if they beat Baltimore, then all of them are going to go up, and then there's going to be people with actual Bengal stacks, and then like your little Mixon team is not going to beat those guys in the finals. So I was like, you just have to like if you're going to take the Bengals, just like be uncomfortable with it and just draft like Burrow and Mixon and Chase or Higgins and just do it and then just trust it. And oh my God, people have reacted so hard. They're going I saw Mixon go in round 2 of a playoff best ball draft the other day. And Burrow and Higgins and Chase are going like round 4, round 5. People are so excited about these Bengals. I really think that they're going to get a lot of ownership. And I just think that there's other games. Like no one should be remotely surprised if the Cowboys-Cardinals game is way better than this game. No one should be surprised if the Rams-Ravens game is way better than this game. And then the last thing that I always love is when there's these games that are really sexy, like Cardinals-Chiefs and Cowboys-Cardinals, and Chiefs, Bengals, I meant, and Rams, Ravens, is that sometimes the teams that go under-owned relative, especially to the ridiculously large team totals, are the really elite teams playing against the really shitty teams. Because people look at it, I can't stack that game because, they're just going to blow them out of the water. Well, two teams in particular this week that have the highest team totals on the slate that probably will blow their opponent out of the water, but that we know are willing to pass even when they're up early are the Buccaneers and the Bills. And the Bills came through in a big way last week, but now it looks like they're going to get Gabe Davis back and Cole Beasley back because of the new COVID restrictions. And I think that obscures the ownership a little bit on their side. And then the other interesting one is the Bucs, where the Bucs, AB was crazy owned last week, but no one really played Gronk and he sucked. No one knew what to do with the rest of these receivers. Cyril Grayson ended up running the most routes. And then everybody's playing Rojo. Now they're going to get the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or now they're going to get the New York Jets. No one was really playing Brady last week. Are people going to play Brady this week? Or is there an opportunity to get, Brady or Josh Allen to be a little bit under-owned? Because even if it's a blowout, easily Brady or Josh Allen could be the highest scoring quarterback on the slate.
Yeah, there's not too many other plays. I'm sitting here and I'm just browsing the plays right now, and I'm like, do I really want to roll out this guy? Do I really want to roll out this guy? And I feel like a lot of these plays are almost chasing the dragon, right? Like you brought up some significant points as to some of the other big plays, but I feel like other people are going to see it. Meanwhile, do you really want to roll out Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater up against the Chargers?
Obviously not. Come on.
No, but yeah,
no.
Yeah,
we have 30 quarterbacks on the slate. You're trying to talk about Drew Lock?
I'm trying to explore options, okay, Jacob? I'm trying
Drew
to.
Lock.
All right, so let's hop over to running backs, and we don't really have much to discuss here. We have Keyshawn Vaughn against the Jets, which is a great play.
Are you like Keyshawn over Rojo?
I'm somewhat kidding.
No, you're not, man. Your dose score is gonna bring you into playing Vaughn, isn't it?
No, because Vaughn can't catch.
Yeah, but he runs more routes.
Yes, but Le'Veon Bell might be an option. That's what scares me away.
Le'Veon Bell played 3 snaps last week.
Yes, he did, because he just joined the team earlier in the week, and they need him to understand the blocking schemes. I don't like any option, honestly, for the...
Here's the best thing I can give you for Rojo is that Bruce Arians won't be on the sidelines because of COVID. So if Rojo fumbles, he gets to stay in the game.
Yeah, but that's great for Keyshawn Vaughn as well.
He hates both these guys. He hates all his running backs.
I'm saying, that's why I don't like
Gio Bernard, who's on.
Might really like Le'Veon Bell. I'm just saying, he used to coach at Le'Veon Bell.
Maybe. How upset are you? Because I'm extremely upset because I drafted him and he's on my Puppy 2 final best ball team. How upset are you that we got a Fournette injury and that we can't play dose score king Giovanni Bernard this week? Could you imagine if he was if Gio Bernard was never went on IR, and so all they had was Rojo and Gio this week against the Jets? How hard would you be pumping Gio Bernard tomorrow as your start of the week?
He'd already be off by now. Just saying. You talking about pumping somebody? He'd already be pumped off.
You'd have 12 catches.
He'd already be off. All right, so
I'm so sad.
It's sad. It is sad. But I'm looking at the dose score, and a lot of these matchups aren't great. Which, by the way, we're going to improve the dose score of the offseason. I have a lot of things to actually discuss with Jacob as well, in terms of applying the dose score to multiple different positions and everything. Because it's accurate. It's ridiculously accurate, which is strange because it's like we try to come up with all these fantasy stats and these analytics, and it's like, all right, prove it. And it's like, oh, this one hit at 51%. That means that it's accurate. It's like, okay. But anyways, let's go ahead and review. I don't even know Dare Ungwale as a value.
No.
Okay, up against the Patriots.
But Raquel Armstead is probably going to get the early down carries.
Okay, let me bring up this scenario to you, then we'll get out of here, because honestly, there's really not much else to play. Do you have any other significant things you want to mention? And then I'll bring up this ridiculous theory that I have.
If the haters and losers still don't want to play Sony Michel, I will continue to play Sony Michel. I don't understand what more this man has to do to get played in DFS. He's the workhorse every single week. Now Darrell Henderson's on IR. People would rather convince themselves that Cam Akers is going to come off a torn Achilles and have 50% of the snaps this week can just play our God and our King, Sony Michel. But I love Sony. I love Devin Singletary this week. I mean, his role is really great up against Atlanta. I'm curious to see how chalky he is. I feel like he probably won't be super popular because he's Devin Singletary, and I just don't think people really get all that excited to play Devin Singletary. And if he's not that popular, but Josh Allen is, that can be your leverage point right there, right? What if they do hit their 30-point team total, but Devin Singletary gets 2 rushing touchdowns? We now have, I believe, 3 straight weeks of Singletary just dominating touches in that backfield. I think we can safely say that it is his backfield. And the other guy that I will play, it's a stressful play, but I'll play a lot of Elijah Mitchell this week if he is cleared and healthy. He gets a nut matchup versus Houston, and there's just so many reasons not to play him, right? Like Jeff Wilson is all of a sudden looked much better than he did earlier in the year. And so what if it's a 50-50 split? You still have JaMychal Hasty, Kyle Juszczyk kicking around on third downs. Trey Lance is going to vulture touchdowns at the goal line. Deebo Samuel is going to vulture touchdowns at the goal line. And all those reasons are why no one will play Elijah Mitchell, who 3 weeks ago, before he got injured, if he was against Houston, would have been 35% owned. And so all you really have to do is just say, what if nothing actually changed? And we get Elijah Mitchell in the same role he was in 3 weeks ago against Houston, but instead of 35% owned, he's 3.5% owned.
I'll take Kyle Juszczyk.
I'll load up Elijah Mitchell. What?
I'll take Kyle Juszczyk.
You're gonna play Kyle Juszczyk?
I did a couple weeks ago and actually won money. So
no, there's no way that you won a tournament with Kyle Juszczyk and it's like 10 points.
Yeah, I did. He had a touchdown performance with like 4 receptions for 35 yards, something.
And what did that do?
It gave me leverage on the slate, I guess. I don't even remember. Oh no, it was for underdog. It was your draft on underdog.
Okay.
Sorry, I apologize.
I was like, you're not winning a Millie Maker with 13 points from
Kyle. I didn't win significant money. I'm talking about I won like $50 on a $5 entry.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. All right, but I do have a theory here. Okay, so
let's hear your theory.
And you're a Colts fan, so I would appreciate your insight. And maybe I'm dead wrong, but I read an article today for Trophy Smack. You guys can go check it out. And it's the waiver wires you want to trash. The players that you cannot understand why people are putting on the waivers.
Yeah, or are people are people picking up Desmond Patman?
No, like for example, Josh Palmer was one of my guys I want to trash, which may or may not, Palmer. But not for this week, not for a play to win you a championship, and maybe it is because that's controversial. That's why I put him as the lead. Yeah, every single week actually over the past 6 weeks, I've hit on 3 out of 4 players, which allow less than double-digit fantasy points. Nice. So they're just players you just don't want to play. Like, for example, everybody's saying, and I don't understand this at all, but last week everybody's like, Trevor Lawrence up against the Jets, perform. Playing with Laquan Treadwell. And so I was like, no, don't play them. Everybody's like, Ben Roethlisberger's been on a hot streak. I'm like, no, don't play him. I said Rashad Bateman, and Rashad Bateman luckily got in the end zone.
God. His first drive, it looked like he was going to go for like 18 catches and 100. He had 5 targets, 4 for 26 and 1 on drive 1, and he saw 0 targets for the rest of the game.
It was still a fail. I didn't think Josh Johnson was going to target him. In my defense, I actually didn't even have Josh Johnson. I had Tyler Huntley. But either way, I want to talk about Deion Jackson. Do you know who Deion Jackson is?
He's from Duke, and he's going to be the Colts' backup running back. But if Taylor somehow contracts COVID-19, he would be the Colts' probably splitting some of the early down work, and then Hines playing on the passing situations.
Yes! I knew I could trust you when I asked you this. This is something where I was a little bit nervous, right? I was like, okay, I'm going to put this guy in my article as a player that you might want to pick up just in case. Because
I want to think about this. This timeline involves Taylor being on the COVID list, and I don't want to acknowledge that timeline. I want him in bubble wrap.
It does. And we just had your guard, right? And Marlon Mack.
We have 0 O-linemen that are healthy right now. We have our left tackle is day-to-day with a knee injury, a pectoral injury, and an ankle injury. All 3 somehow on one play. And then Big Q is on the COVID list. Ryan Kelly, of course, incredibly tragic situation, but unlikely to play due to a personal matter. And then we got Glowinski's on the COVID list. He'll probably be back. And then Braden Smith also just put on the COVID list, and he's unvaccinated.
Smith, which is a massive, part of this offense.
Yeah.
Now, they have a chance to come back for the most part.
Well, everyone on this fucking team is unvaccinated, by the way. Like Wentz, Smith, Nelson, Leonard. Like, why are all of our best players unvaccinated? Like, can we please? Fuck. Anyway,
all right,
sorry.
So hypothetically, right? This is on the offensive side for the most part. I mean, you guys have some players on defense as well. But what if somehow it leaks over to Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines? And Nyheim Hines. It's possible. I'm not sorry, Jacob. I'm not trying to ruin everything. At least you have Carson Wentz.
I have to watch Sam Ehlinger and Deion Jackson play football on Sunday. I'm gonna lose my shit.
But Carson Wentz, if Carson Wentz does play, right? Deion Jackson is still relevant. Like, he's still okay. Okay, he has a touchdown this season. He has 25% of his carries coming inside the red zone, so we know that he's going to get utilized in the red zone. So if JT does miss time, or maybe it's a blowout, or whatever the case is, he can still see some carries inside the red zone. He can still get a touchdown, maybe two, right? But the biggest thing that he did at Duke was in his junior and sophomore junior season. He actually was very good in the passing game. He had over 20 receptions in each season, gave you multiple yards. His yards per carry weren't great. It was like 4.6. In that conference, you want to see an increased yards per carry around 6 or so. But he still was relevant, and he has the size of these 215 or so. He has the burst. He has the power to be able to generate yards in the red zone, which is what you want playing for the Colts, especially if Jack Doyle's hurt or whoever else. I'm saying, if you were like, let's throw out DFS just for a second. If you were playing him in a season league, right? If you're playing in a season league, would you hypothetically? Because guess what? Oakland is dealing with the same exact issues, worse.
Yeah, their entire defense is on the COVID list.
It's out. Like, so whoever you roll out for
it's backups on both sides of the trenches. It's all backups against all backups.
It's the XFL 2.0, but worse. Could Deion Jackson be a DFS play for you if he's ruled out?
Every other running back is out, yes. If Hines plays, then no, because I think that Jackson will get. Although I will say this: if Taylor gets to end up on the COVID list and Nyheim Hines is chalk, then Deion Jackson is the reason that you don't play chalk Nyheim Hines, because Nyheim Hines, he's not really a running back. He's a weapon. He's a guy that they want to use occasionally in the backfield, occasionally out of the slot, occasionally on these trick plays and jet sweeps and swing passes. I love Nyheim Hines. He's a great player. But the Colts have shown time and time again, going back to Nyheim Hines' rookie season, that when he's the clear option, because whether it's, Marlon Mack or Jonathan Taylor, whoever is unable to play, Nyheim Hines has not gotten the workload. I remember this last year where Taylor, he ends up on the COVID list for a game last year, and everybody was playing Nyheim Hines, and Jordan Wilkins ended up getting half the work. 2 years ago, Marlon Mack went out for a stretch. People were playing Nyheim Hines, and I don't even remember. They had Robert Turbin was a guy that they actually gave work to over Nyheim Hines.
Ultra juice.
And so, exactly. So, point is, Deion Jackson is going to be a thing if Taylor's out. But would I actually play Jackson if somehow Hines and Taylor are out? Yeah. 4K, why not?
Is he a free square?
He is. And I don't think that people would necessarily play him that much. Like Justin Jackson last week was a guy that
nobody's heard about him.
Right? Like he had games before. Like he was a guy last week for a month or so when Eckler was out before Jackson got injured himself that was fantasy viable. Like I was playing him in DFS last year for a few weeks. And then he had that run. He had a really sick game against the Steelers.
Oh, I was talking about Deion Jackson. Nobody knows who Deion Jackson is.
That's what I'm saying. Like Justin Jackson, people knew. And so people were ready for it.
Yeah.
And they weren't necessarily sure what was going to happen, but they were like, we're willing to take a shot on it. I mean, Deion Jackson, I did a little thread on Deion Jackson actually when the Mac rumors were circling around about, okay, this is a guy that you might want to pick up in Dynasty.
Really?
Just because, like the Mac rumors were circling, and then they had cut Jordan Wilkins off the practice squad. And so I did a little thread on Jackson because I was like, hey, if I actually do trade Mac and if Taylor ends up getting hurt or COVID at some point, you're going to want to have this Deion Jackson on your Dynasty bench. And that's essentially the situation we're in now. So I support it. If we get Deion Jackson at 4K with no Taylor, no Hines, I'll play Deion Jackson and DFS,
And
but I'll
no
also be really
defense on the
sad.
Raiders side.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Is there any other sleeper that you have before we get out of here? I mean, this is normally when I bring up like the DPJ, the Nico Collins type players. God. I haven't had time to actually look into those. And, this is where I really look into the matchups and I try and find. Oh, perfect example is who I talked about, Noah Brown up against.
Noah Brown? Their fourth wide receiver in Dallas?
Or not Noah Brown. I'm sorry, Anthony Brown up against.
Okay.
Up against what's his name? Wilk or the freaking wide receiver
Wesley. Anton Wesley.
Yeah, where you can see some touchdowns. Alan Lazard, who went up against slot guys. Whenever Alan Lazard was in the slot up against smaller slot guys, he performed very well. He got touchdowns like 3 weeks in a row. Up against Eddie Jackson, up against the fifth corner or sixth corner from Washington. Either way, I look for matchups here where you could see a touchdown from a guy that's at the 3K line. Do you have a sleeper here, or I have
an absolutely awesome sleeper. I have the sleeper this week. I have a guy that I'm going to be playing in an absolute ton of DFS lineups, and it's a guy that's on the Colts. Okay, here's a guy who, in his 4 seasons in the National Football League, when he actually gets routes, he's had a 34% target rate, 25% target rate, 21% target rate, a 20% target rate. He's never been under 20% targets per route in his life as a National Football League player. Okay. And now he gets a matchup against the 29th best defense against his position. Okay. And he gets the player who's been stealing all his routes for 4 years is injured, probably not available to play in this game. And the Colts, with all of their backup offensive linemen, have been running more and more 2 tight end and 3 tight end sets because they need to have opportunities to be able to block. And they don't have Paris Campbell, and they don't have Zach Pascal, and they don't have any of these wide receivers. And T.Y. Hilton's really old and dusty. Mo Alley Cox, the $2,800, is your DFS tight end this week. I bet he's going to say, if Doyle's out, if Doyle plays, then scratch this. But if Doyle's out, I bet we see a 65 to 70% route share from Mo Alley Cox. And he's going to be up against this sieve of a matchup against tight ends. Absolutely no one's going to play Mo Alley Cox. And in every lineup that I don't have Jonathan Taylor this week, I want to play Mo Alley Cox because he's the guy who, when they're on the 1 yard line and 50% own Jonathan Taylor is standing in the backfield, Frank Reich's going to do something stupid, and he's going to do a play action to Taylor. He's going to throw in the end zone to Gigantor, and Gigantor is going to steal your Jonathan Taylor touchdown this week, and he'll steal it from my lineup. I'm playing Mo Alley Cox in 30% of my lineups this week.
You know who's Mo Alley Cox before it was Mo Alley Cox? Demetrius Harris, and he shredded my heart. But I like Mo Alley Cox.
You know who might actually be the play is Kylan Granson, my dynasty love. But one of those guys is going to have a touchdown this week.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
You can get Kylan even cheaper, I bet. I bet he's mid-price. Yeah, $2,500 for Kylan.
Man, it's tough. It's tough.
Season high, 2 catches.
We're in the streets, yo. We're in the streets. We're in the DFS streets trying to figure all this out. We had a lot to dissect tonight, to be honest. This is something that we're gonna, work on in the future, of course, and see if we can get right. Maybe. I'm not guaranteeing it because we wanted to do it this year. We weren't able to, but I would love to do something, with you in 2022. Absolutely. We're at least gonna finish out 2021 with y'all for DFS on Tuesday nights. Come get an early preview with us over here at Fantasy Intervention. I'm thinking about calling it the Nip. Yeah, I'm gonna call it the Nip.
I like it, the Nip. Yeah, we're just getting a little nip.
Yeah, we're just getting a little nip, a little taste, something, right? That's what alcoholics do. They're like, hey, let me get a little nip, for Fantasy Intervention. And we'll roll from there.
I love it.
All right, my friend. All right, let's get out of here. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you all for letting us intervene with your fantasy football life. We're out.